Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here with part 1 of my 2021 most anticipated releases. So I'm going to be doing these quarterly, so this first video will be from January through March. Some people have these really beautiful, concise, pared down, organized lists. That's not what you're going to get here. If you're new to my anticipated releases videos, I tend to just pick a few buzzwords or a few of the things that I talk about the things that attracted me to a book rather than a full and complete summary, because I'm somebody who doesn't like to have a full summary going into a book. I am going to link the Goodreads pages for all of these down below, so if you do like more information you can find that. But yeah, this is just going to be kind of me chatting about what about this book makes me think I'm going to enjoy it, what makes me excited for it, and believe it or not, I did actually narrow down this list, but we still have quite a few books to talk about. Also, if there's a book where I first heard about it from a particular person's channel or anticipated releases video, I will mention that and link them down below as well. Okay, so starting out in January, we have 6 books that are releasing on January 5th. By the way, I will be probably looking down at my notes a lot, so I'm sorry for that. But the first one is The Sea in Winter by Christine Day. I really loved I Can Make This Promise by Christine Day, which I read a couple of years ago. This sounds like it's going to be another powerful contemporary book. We follow our main character Maisie, who is recovering from a ballet injury, and I think the story is about her dealing with anxiety and possibly some kind of emotional turmoil, or even maybe depression or anger management issues. It says that I think she's dealing with some dark mood swings and things like that. The summary also seems to mention a really supportive family, which I love, and the main character's heritage is from the Makah and Piscataway tribes, and I believe the author is from the Upper Skagit tribe. Next we have Better Luck Next Time by Julia Claiborne Johnson. So this book sounds really interesting. It's a historical fiction and it's set on a divorce ranch in 1930s Reno, because the premise is I guess if you wanted to get a divorce in Nevada, you had to be a resident for a certain amount of time. I think it's a few months. And so basically this divorce ranch springs up where women who want divorces, they live here for a while before they can get their divorce. So I think it's going to be about friendships, and I think there might be a romance angle as well. There's a character who's described as Cary Grant in cowboy boots. So I just think this one sounds like a lot of fun, and a brief snippet from the synopsis is a novel about divorce, marriage, and everything that comes in between. Money, class, ambition, and opportunity. Better Luck Next Time is a hilarious yet poignant examination of the ways friendship can save us, love can destroy us, and the family we create can be stronger than the family we come from. So I think that sounds really interesting. Also on that date we have a nonfiction book, which is White Feminism, From the Suffragettes to Influencers and Who They Leave Behind by Beck. This one I'm really looking forward to. So it's about obviously white feminism and the groups of people that white feminism leaves out. And the synopsis specifically mentions overlooked communities, including Native American, Muslim, transgender, and more. So I just think this sounds like a really important book. I'm really excited to get to this one, and especially because I've been reading more nonfiction about the suffrage movement, and I really appreciate when the nonfiction books engage with the inherent racism and other prejudices in that movement. So really excited about that. Also on that date we have The Heiress, The Revelations of Anne de Burgh by Molly Greeley. So I really loved The Clergyman's Wife, which was her previous novel, her debut novel. This one seems to be very different in tone. This feels like more of a gothic novel, and it follows the character of Anne de Burgh from Pride and Prejudice. It deals with laudanum addiction. There's also a female-female romance, and I think the blurb compares this to Jane Austen meets Sarah Waters, which I have not read a Sarah Waters book before, but this sounds really interesting. Yeah, definitely going to be very different in tone from her first book, but I'm intrigued. Also on this date we have The Trouble with Good Ideas by Amanda Panitch. This is on Voices for the Jewish Representation, and we follow our main character who has to leave her Jewish school and go to public school for the first time, and she's also dealing with the fact that her great-grandpa is very sick and she's very close to him. And in order to, I think, deal with some of the troubles that she's going through, she ends up building a golem who then I think turns against her, or she's worried is going to turn against her, so she has to defeat this creature. I'm not generally drawn toward golems in fiction, even though one of my favorite books is The Golem and the Genie. It's that's a very different take, I feel on that character type. But the other things about this book really intrigued me, so I'm hoping that I still enjoyed this one. And then the last book on January 5th that I'm going to talk about is Glimpsed by G.F. Miller. So this is I think a contemporary fantasy. Our main character is a fairy godmother in high school, but things kind of start going wrong for her because an ex of her client, of one of her clients, wants this main character to help him get back his girlfriend. It turns out that these matches she's been making and wishes she's been granting have not been going as well as she thinks. So yeah, she has to help this guy win back his girlfriend, and I imagine that feelings develop from there. So I just think that one sounds really fun. Then we have 2 books on January 12th. The first one is Into the Heartless Wood by Joanna Ruth Meyer. So this is a book about a tree siren, and she saves a boy's life. She's normally meant to kill the people that she takes, and then he keeps coming to see her, so I think they develop a relationship. She starts longing to be human, and then both of these characters get wrapped up into this kind of ancient war involving the witch of this forest and the king of this kingdom. And Joanna Ruth Meyer, like the way she describes like the premise of this book is that it's kind of a gender swapped Beauty and the Beast retelling, but then the second half is more like a Little Mermaid retelling if the Little Mermaid was a murderous tree, which I just think sounds really interesting. Because I'm filming this so late, I have actually already read this one, but you will hear about my thoughts in my January wrap-up. Then the other one I want to mention is not exactly a new release, but it's the new release of the paperback edition of Untamed Shore by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I love Moreno-Garcia's books, and I am going to mention a paperback because paperbacks deserve more attention, and it's my channel and I can do what I want. But yeah, this is a mystery thriller set in Baja California, and I think our main character gets, she's like working for this group of tourists, and then I think one of them gets murdered, and so like she has to figure out what's going on. I don't know. I don't tend to read mystery thrillers, but I will basically read anything Silvia Moreno-Garcia writes, so that's why I'm reading this one. Then we have 3 books on January 19th. The first one is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. So this is a middle grade fantasy. It's the first book in a series, and our main character Amari's older brother goes missing. Then she has to go to a magical boarding school to compete for a place there. This fantasy world has creatures like mermaids, dwarves, yetis, and magicians. She has a roommate who is apparently a were-dragon, and I think Amari ends up with an enhanced ability that is illegal or like forbidden in this world. This just sounds really great. I've been hearing really great early reviews. Next I have Cast in Firelight by Dana Swift. So this is a fantasy novel, and we're following 2 main characters who are like betrothed. They're engaged to be married, but they don't want to be, so they end up like working together to try and like I think figure out what's going on regarding some politics like among the different kingdoms, and they're working together because if they, I guess, solve this, then they won't have to be engaged to each other, but I imagine that they end up wanting to be engaged to each other. That's just a trope I love, so I'm really excited about this one. And then the last one on January 19th is The Comeback, a figure skating novel by E.L. Shen. And this is a book about a main character who is a figure skater, and this is another one I'm going to read a little snippet of the synopsis for. Set in Lake Placid, New York, this is a spunky yet stirring middle grade story that examines racism, female rivalry and friendship, and the enduring and universal necessity of love and support. I think that sounds wonderful. We have 1 book coming out on January 21st, and that is The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. So this is a political fantasy, and our main character is trying to trick herself into a noble house or a noble family or something like that, and she quickly becomes embroiled in palace intrigue and political like machinations. And the vibes I get from the summary and the cover and everything makes me think this might be an Italian-inspired fantasy, so that would be another thing I'm excited about. But either way, I think this one sounds really interesting. And then I have 1 book I want to mention on January 26th, that is 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. This is the story of the Trojan War from the women's perspectives, and basically I think this book sounds like what The Silence of the Girls was trying to do. I was super disappointed in that one, but this one I think sounds really good, and I feel like the reviews have been good. So I'm hoping that unlike The Silence of the Girls, this book actually focuses on women's agency and female friendship. Okay, moving into February, I have 1 book on February 2nd, and that is Dearest, Josephine by Caroline George. So this is a dual timeline story, which I don't normally enjoy. Like, I'm very picky about those, but this one sounds really good. So we have one of the main characters is, I think, a writer, and she ends up finding this book that's like a love story or like letters from the main character who he is from the past. Like, she's at this estate and she finds these letters that he wrote to this woman he's in love with, and then she ends up finding a novel that was written a few hundred years ago where she is the main character, it seems like. So I don't know. I also think this cover is beautiful. I just think this sounds really interesting. I don't feel like I did a good job explaining it, but I'm intrigued. Okay, and then gear up because we have 5 books on February 5th. The first one is 400 Souls, A Community History of African America, 1619 to 2019. This is edited by Ibram X. Kendi, and there are a bunch of contributors. And this is told in 80 chronological chapters, and each contributor covers 5 years each of African American history, starting from 1619 when the first enslaved Africans were brought to the US. And this is from the synopsis. Contributors include some of the best known scholars, writers, historians, journalists, lawyers, poets, and activists of contemporary America who together bring to vivid life countless new facets to the drama of slavery and resistance, segregation and survival, migration and self-discovery, cultural oppression, and world-changing artistic, literary, and musical creativity. In these pages are dozens of extraordinary lives and personalities rescued from the archives and restored to their rightful place in America's narrative, as well as the ghosts of millions more. I feel like this is going to be on a lot of people's lists, and this just sounds really important and just like a fantastic project. Next I have Real by Cujec and Peyton Goddard, and this book is Own Voices for the Autism Representation. I believe that Peyton Goddard is the Own Voices writer, and I think that Cujec like co-wrote this, but I don't think that she is autistic. As I said, it's Own Voices for the Autism Representation, and the main character is a girl who has non-speaking autism. And even though she's really, really smart, everyone treats her like she isn't, just because she doesn't speak, or she doesn't speak the same way everyone else does. And this one has really good early reviews. In particular, I saw some Own Voices reviews that were really praising the representation. And this reminds me a little bit of Out of My Mind by Sharon Draper, which I read recently and really thought was great. So I'm really looking forward to this one. And I actually have a review copy that I was sent from Shadow Mountain Publishing. So thank you so much to them. And I'm really looking forward to getting to this one. Next, I have Love is a Revolution by Renée Watson. And this is a book where the female main character, I think she gets a crush on this guy, and it turns out he is like really, he's an activist and he's very involved in community work and everything. So she kind of tells a few lies about her being involved in that too, and then these lies kind of start spiraling out of control. And so she actually ends up, I think, becoming part of these activities. Like, she ends up actually developing into more of an activist, like through these lies that she told to this guy. And it's a story about activism and friendship, and also about self-love. So here's a snippet from the summary. Plus-size girls are beautiful and get the attention of the hot guys. The popular girl clique is not shallow, but has strong convictions and substance. And the ultimate love story is not only about romance, but about how to show radical love to the people in your life, including to yourself. I just think that sounds wonderful. Also on this day, we have Fat Chance Charlie Vega by Crystal Maldonado. So this is another book that has fat rep, and in this one, I think our main character has a crush on this really popular guy, and he ends up asking her out, and she's really excited. She says yes, and then she finds out that he actually asked her best friend out first, who's like very thin and popular, and this is, I think, another book that deals with self-love, and I feel like this one has also gotten really good reviews, and I just think this sounds really fantastic. It is also Own Voices for the fat representation, and like, I love that we're getting these romantic contemporaries with fat main characters. I think that's amazing. Also on this day, we have A Taste for Love by Jennifer Yen, and this book involves a baking competition. So our main character thinks that she's entering a baking competition, and when she gets there, she finds out that her mother has used this to like set her up with like different Asian American guys that she like wants her to date. So this sounds really cute. We're gonna have baking, we're gonna have some cute romance. I think this just sounds like a great time. Okay, and we have 7 books coming out on February 9th. The first one is We Are the Ashes, We Are the Fire by Joy McCullough. She wrote Blood, Water, Paint, which is one of my favorite books I've read ever. And this is another book that sounds really powerful. This one also deals with sexual assault, and I think this one, it's like a modern day story. And our main character, like her sister, I believe, was raped, and the main character has been one of the people like who really is involved in the court case and who helps bring her sister's rapist to justice. And they actually win the case, but then he's sentenced to no jail time. And so our main character is like really, really furious and upset about this, and she ends up turning to stories of Marguerite de Brosseau, who is a 15th century French noblewoman who is legendary as an avenging knight for rape victims. So I believe there's like a historical dimension to this book as well, and I just think this is going to be a really intense, but I think a really like well done story. We also have The Witch's Heart, and I just realized I forgot to write down the author for that one, so I will put that information on the screen or in the captions as well. This is a story that is based on Norse mythology. We're following a woman who is a banished witch, and she falls in love with Loki, like the Norse god, and they end up developing some kind of relationship and having children together. And then I think the conflict, or one of the conflicts of the story, is if our main character is going to believe the prophecy that she sees or that she has, because she can also like tell the future sometimes, if she's going to believe that, or if she's going to fight for a different future. I think it involves her children in some way. That's very vague. Again, I'm not very good at summarizing these, but I just think that sounds really interesting, and I really enjoy stories that incorporate mythology. Next, I have Torch by R.J. Anderson. I am so excited for this. This is book 3 in a series that I have loved for a very long time, and it's been a very long time in between books. I've talked about this series a lot on my channel recently. I will link my spoiler-free review for the first 2 books down below. But basically, like, we did not know if we were ever getting a 3rd book, and now the books are being republished, and this is the 3rd book. And I'm so excited. I can't really tell you a lot about the story because it is obviously the 3rd book in a trilogy, but I love this series. I love the writing and the characters and the themes, and I think it does really interesting things with Cornish folklore and fairies and that kind of mythology. I think that even if you're not somebody, I've said this before, but I think even if you're not somebody who is super into fae books, I think you could still enjoy this one. But yeah, I just really enjoy this series, and I'm so excited that we have book 3 now. Next, I have A Pho Love Story by Lone Lee. This is about 2 Vietnamese American teenagers who fall for each other even though their parents have rival pho restaurants. And I just think this sounds so cute, and I feel like there's going to be some good angst. I'm very picky about angst, but this sounds like the kind that I would enjoy. Next, I have Ladies of the House, a modern retelling of Sense and Sensibility by Lauren Edmondson. That's all I really know about this one, honestly, is the title and subtitle. I did kind of scan the synopsis, but I don't remember a lot about it really. It's enough to know that this is a Jane Austen retelling, and it's gotten very good reviews so far. So I'm like pretty picky about my Jane Austen retellings, but I am excited about this one. Next is Ancestor Approved, Intertribal Stories for Kids, edited by Cynthia Leitig-Smith. And this is a collection of interconnected stories taking place at a powwow, written by a bunch of different Native American and Indigenous authors. A few that I am really excited about are Christine Day, Tracy Sorrell, and Rebecca Roanhorse. And there's a lot of other writers as well. And this is from the synopsis. A collection of intersecting stories set at a powwow that bursts with hope, joy, resilience, the strength of community, and Native pride. In a high school gym full of color and song, Native families from nations within the borders of the US and Canada dance, sell beadwork and books, and celebrate friendship and heritage. They are the heroes of their own stories. I just think this sounds like a really fantastic collection, and once again, a stunning cover. Next is The Girl from Shadow Springs by Ellie Cipher. This is an indie published book that I've heard really good things about from Bethany at Beautifully Bookish Bethany and Mara at Books Like Whoa. I will link both of them down below. They just really enjoyed this one, and I think the premise sounds super interesting. This is a wintry fantasy plus survival story that has a little bit of like Wild West feeling, but like obviously in a wintry fantasy context. And our main character, she has to rescue her sister who has been kidnapped after, I think she like finds the body of somebody she wasn't supposed to or something like that. In order to rescue her sister, she ends up having to find an item with the help of this dead man's nephew. And I just think this sounds really interesting. I'm like not super big on Westerns, but when they're mixed in with other genres, I can really enjoy it. And then I have one book on February 16th that I want to mention, and that is Amelia Unabridged by Ashley Schumacher. And I heard about this one from Lily at Utopia State of Mind. I will link her down below. She talked about this. I think she read an arc, and she just made this sound like such an interesting book. So this is a book about grief. It also deals with like book fandoms. I think our main character, like her and her best friend, are like really big fans of this book series. They have a fight about like who's going to go to an event or something like that, and then the main character's best friend actually dies, and so she's really torn up by this grief and by this guilt about the fact that like their last interaction was a fight. And then I think she ends up meeting the author, and like there's like an indie bookstore element, and I think there's like kind of a mystery aspect because I think the main character starts finding out some things about like what happened to her friend and maybe why that happened. And yeah, I just think this sounds really interesting. Okay guys, we're on the last month. I know this is a lot of books, but I'm very excited about all of these. I have 3 to talk about on March 2nd. The first is Down Comes the Night by Allison Saft. I really don't know much about this one except that it's a hate to love romance with like a creepy mansion, and our main characters are stuck there and they have to work together to, I think, escape or try to find their way out. It sounds good. I'm excited. I also have The Conductors by Nicole Glover, and this is a, I think, historical fiction series or historical mystery series with possibly some fantasy elements. Our main character is a woman who previously helped slaves escape on the Underground Railroad, and I think now that slavery is over, her and her husband are like investigators, I think, like they solve mysteries. So this is the first book in that mystery series. And then the last book on March 2nd is the graphic novel edition of Artemis Fowl: The Arctic Incident by Owen Colfer, adapted by Michael Morecci, illustrated by Stephen Gilpin. And this is like the redesigned graphic novel with an art style that I like a lot more than the old ones. I still have not read my graphic novel of the first one because I've been saving it, but I am really excited about this one. Definitely going to be getting this and reading it at some point. But the original series is one of my absolute favorite series of all time, and yeah, really excited that we are getting, like, we're continuing to get the graphic novels in the series. I really hope that they do the whole series. And then I have 3 books on March 9th. The first one is Amina's Song by Hina Khan. This is the sequel to Amina's Voice, which I read and absolutely loved. This is an Own Voices Muslim contemporary, and I don't really know a lot about the sequel, but I don't really need to because I loved the first book so much. I loved the characters, I loved the themes. I thought the way that the book dealt with Islamophobia and other issues in a really kid-appropriate but also honest way was just really well done, so I am really looking forward to this sequel as well. Next I have Sing Me Forgotten by Jessica S. Olson. I did not write down many notes for this one. I just wrote gender-swapped Phantom of the Opera, memory magic, and honestly, yeah, I'm interested. Next is Perfect on Paper by Sophie Gonzalez. I don't remember if I got this from the synopsis or like the author describing their book or what, but I have written down here, a bisexual girl who gives anonymous love advice to her classmates is hired by the hot guy to help him get his ex back. And I just think this sounds like a really interesting and fun contemporary. I also know that the author talked about like her reasons for writing this book. She kind of joked it's like a subtweet, which like she was kidding about, but also kind of not kidding, because I guess that she has always written bisexual characters. I believe that is Own Voices. And for a long time, her bisexual characters ended up in same-sex relationships. And then in one of her books, she had a side character who was bisexual, who ended up in a romance with somebody of a different sex or gender, and people didn't like that. And so she was saying, like, in response to that kind of like biphobia, she wanted to write a romantic relationship between a bisexual girl and a guy, because that is bisexual representation too. So anyway, that's just some kind of like background on that book that I think is like, I'm really glad that she's getting the opportunity to write this book, and I think this sounds like a really fun story. I have one book to mention on March 15th, and that is The Descent of the Drowned by Anna Lal-Din. And I believe this is an indie published title as well. There's a lot of like really interesting elements in the summary, like goddesses, and the character dynamics sound really interesting. This sounds like it's going to be a very intense fantasy. So again, I will like link the Goodreads page and everything if you want like more specifics about that. But the specific things I want to mention is part of the synopsis, which says, set in a colonized Indo-Persian world and inspired by pre-Islamic Arabian mythology, The Descent of the Drowned is a tale about power, identity, and redemption, and what it takes to hold on to one's humanity in the face of devastation. So that description, plus the story elements in the summary, I think this sounds fantastic. I have 5 books to talk about that are releasing on March 16th. The first one is one of my most anticipated releases probably for the whole year, and that is The Mere Season by Anna Marie McLemore. Anna Marie McLemore is one of my absolute favorite authors. I think if you have been watching my channel for any amount of time, you probably know this. But yeah, I have loved all of their work, and this novel is inspired by the story of the Snow Queen, by that fairy tale, and this book deals with sexual assault. So we're following I believe a female and male character as our 2 leads, and they were both sexually assaulted at the same party. And I believe the boy does not remember anything about his attacker, but the girl does, and I think that starts causing some conflict, but they also end up really leaning on each other because they understand what the other person has been through. And then I think some things start coming out about this party and about their assailant. Yeah, I think this is going to be another like really powerful and really well done book. I always love the way that McLemore writes. Like, their writing is absolutely gorgeous, and I think their character work is like just so good, and that's really impressive to me when you have this very like flowery writing style that you can still develop characters so well. And I think the themes obviously sound very important in this book. So yeah, one of my most anticipated releases for the year, hands down. And then also on March 16th, Joy McCullough actually has another book coming out this year, and this is a middle grade contemporary called Across the Pond. Our main character is a young girl who moves to Scotland with her family, and she's kind of leaving some friendship drama back home, and then I think she finds an old birding journal, and that's all I really know. Again, I'm just pretty much excited about anything this author comes out with. Also on this day, I have one of my other most anticipated releases, and that is That Way Madness Lies, 15 of Shakespeare's most notable works reimagined, edited by Dahlia Adler. Y'all, like, you know, I love Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare retellings, and a couple of the authors that are in this collection are Joy McCullough and Anna Marie McLemore, so like just extra excited. Yeah, I think this sounds amazing. Also on this day, I have Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Booley, and this is a mystery novel, a YA mystery, I believe. And our main character is a girl who, I think she witnesses a murder, and then this is from the summary. It says, reluctantly, Donis agrees to go undercover, but secretly pursues her own investigation, tracking down the criminals with her knowledge of chemistry and traditional medicine. And I just think that sounds really, really interesting and really good. And then the last one on March 16th is Soul Lanterns by Shaw Kuski, translated by Emily Balistrieri. And this is obviously a translated novel, and our main character lives on Hiroshima, and every year they have a lantern memorial ceremony for all of the bombing victims after the US bombed them during World War II. And this is from the synopsis. Soul Lanterns is an honest exploration of what happened on August 6th, 1945, and offers readers a glimpse not only into the rich cultural history of Japan, but also into the intimate lives of those who recognize, better than most, the urgent need for peace. I feel like this is going to be a really emotional book, but that sounds really wonderful. I have one book to talk about that is releasing on March 21st, and that is Amber and Clay by Laura Amy Schlitz, illustrated by Julia Iredale. And this is a novel in verse, which I tend to really enjoy those. And there's like mythology plus ancient history. There's like a ghost and human friendship. Like, I think we follow 2 main characters in, I think, ancient Greece maybe, and I think one of these kids actually dies and becomes friends with a kid character who is still alive. I don't know, this is one that has like a really interesting sounding synopsis, but again, I don't want to like know or remember too much about the story going in, so that's all I have for you. But the structure also sounds really interesting because it's told partly in verse, partly in prose, and I think there's some illustrations as well. 2 books on March 23rd. The first is Lost in the Neverwoods by Aidan Thomas. Aidan Thomas wrote Cemetery Boys, which I own, but I have not gotten to. I've heard amazing things though. I'm really excited about it. And this is a Peter Pan retelling. with some like mysterious woods involved. That's really all I know, but I think this sounds great. And then I also want to mention The Theft of Sunlight by Intisar Kanani. This one's really interesting because this is a sequel to a book that I technically have read, but I actually want to reread it before I get to this one because the first book, Thorn, is one that I read a long time ago, and it was at that time an indie published book, and then I think this author got traditionally published and did a lot of like editing and changing on that book, so I want to reread that before I read this one, even though this one seems to be like a connected book that maybe could be read as a standalone just because I think it follows different characters, but I'm not sure. Like, I can't swear to that. This is a sequel to the first book, which is a Goose Girl retelling. I don't know if this one is a particular retelling. I believe the main character also has a clubfoot. I don't know if that representation is own voices or not. But this character, I think ends up getting involved in court intrigue somehow. I think she's coming from maybe a small village or something like that. And she ends up getting the help of the foreign princess at this court to try and navigate what is going on. This is a very bad synopsis. I will obviously link the Goodreads page, but basically this sounded good, and it's a good reminder that I meant to reread the first book in the series. Okay guys, we are down to the last 3. All of these books are coming out on March 30th. The first one is All You Need Is Love by Tanya Guerrero, and I first heard about this one from Ashley at Bookish Realm. So this is a middle grade contemporary, and our main character is actually sent away. Her mother sends her to stay with some family because she's planning to leave her abusive husband, so this main character's father, and she doesn't want her like there to be in danger while she's doing this. So the main character gets sent to live with her strange grandmother in Barcelona, and then she ends up, I think, having to help save the family bakery. And yeah, I think like the synopsis was talking about how she ends up really loving this bakery and getting close with her grandmother and starting to connect with her family. And I just think this sounds really lovely. Also does sound like it's going to deal with some pretty heavy topics, so I'm interested to see how that is done. But yeah, this book sounds great. Also on this day we have The Accidental Apprentice by Amanda Foody. This is a middle grade fantasy, and our main character, like, he's kind of like this ordinary guy, like not necessarily a hero, but he accidentally bonds with a beast in the woods, which is forbidden. Like, nobody's supposed to do that. I think they're all afraid of the beasts. So he ends up having to go to this mysterious town of the lore keepers to like learn more about this connection he has, and how to use it, and then I think adventure ensues. And then finally, the last book I have to talk about today is also releasing on March 30th, and that is We Belong by Cookie Hiponia Everman. This is another novel in verse, and it is set in the Philippines, and it's about 2 sisters who ask their mom for a story, I think maybe about her life. And she tells 2 stories, one of herself as refugee and one of Filipino mythology, and those stories end up kind of intertwining. And here is a snippet from the summary. As they get ready for bed, their mama spins 2 tales, that of her youth as a strong-willed middle child and refugee, and that of the young life of Mayari, the mythical daughter of a god. Both are tales of sisterhood and motherhood, and of the difficult experience of trying to fit into a new culture and having to fight for a home and acceptance. Glorious and layered, this is a portrait of family and strength for the ages. I think that sounds really wonderful and really interesting, and we definitely don't get a lot of books set in the Philippines or with Filipino main characters, and I am just really intrigued by the idea of these 2 stories intertwining, so I think that sounds fantastic. Those are all of the books that I am most anticipating for the first 3 months of the year. I know this was really a lot. Can you believe I thought this was going to be a short video? I know, I'm ridiculous. But when I do my anticipated releases, these are not like I have to read all of these books during this year. I have a really wide variety of reading interests, so I think that naturally translates to having a wide variety of books I'm excited for. So hopefully you heard about some that interest you that you hadn't heard of before. Again, I will link the Goodreads pages for these books down below, so if you if you want more information than my very haphazard summary or like reasons that I'm interested in these, please check those out. And please comment down below and let me know what one of your most anticipated releases are for the first 3 months of the year. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!